Recently, the Society for Vascular Surgery decided to create an audio-video archive of famous vascular surgeons in the world. Our chairman, Dr. Jimmy Yao, has a committee including Roger Gregory and a number of others that are doing these interviews of individuals who have contributed to vascular surgery. My name is Norman M. Rich, and today I have the privilege and pleasure of interviewing an internationally renowned vascular surgeon, Dr. Jan S. Brunkwall of Cologne, Germany. And we look forward to hearing more about his thoughts related to vascular surgery. Dr. Brunkwall, thank you very much for your willingness to conduct this interview, particularly in English, and knowing you speak both Swedish and German as well. A good way to start is, how many of the languages do you speak, if I may ask?
Well, if you take the Scandinavian languages, which are Norwegian and Danish as well, I have them as my home languages as well. And then I speak some words of French, but that's about it.
Well, thank you again. And you know, as Americans, we're always intimidated by Europeans who speak so many languages. And you probably know the history of this country, that the German language lost by one vote as being the official language, history that most Americans don't know about.
No.
But anyway, to start with, you were born in Sweden. Tell us where in Sweden and a little bit of your early years, please.
Okay, I was born in Stockholm at one of the big hospitals called Södersjukhuset. My mother was a nurse there, and that's why I was born there. And my father did studies for veterinary medicine. And then soon after I was born, my father got a job in the south of Sweden, so I moved down there with them, of course, because I was only 3 years old and I couldn't take care of myself. And then I spent most of my growing up years in the south of Sweden, coming to the University of Lund.
Before you went to Lund, what high school did you attend?
I went to, you know, we have a somewhat different system. It's called the ground school, which is the first 6 years. And then I went to secondary school for another 3 years, and then high school in Landskrona, which is a border town close to the Danish border, and that's where I graduated in 1972.
When did you first think about medicine?
Well, my father was, or is still a practicing veterinarian. So medicine was what I was going to do. I joined him since I was 3 years up till the days when I went to school. And I was with him almost every day, and I wanted to be a veterinarian up till the age of about 12. And then we had good friends, and that was the GP in the small town where I was grown up. And when I started to talk to him, he said that, well, maybe you should talk to your patients because you like talking. So that was the first thoughts of going into medicine at the age of 12.
So your father and this GP were your first two mentors then,
yeah,
that led you toward medicine. And
yeah.
Why did you choose the University of Lund?
It was because it was very close to where I was grown up, but I was prepared to go even abroad. You know, the system in Sweden was very competitive, and I wasn't quite sure that I was going to be accepted in the first run. So that's why I went abroad to study French. I went down to south of France for 2 months and had a brief but a very good course in French in order to be able to study medicine in Leuven, which is in Belgium.
Yes.
They have two universities there. One is French speaking and the other one is Flemish.
Yeah.
So I was prepared for that, and I came back home just close to Christmas, and my Christmas present was that I was accepted to study in Lund, which of course made my parents very happy that I shouldn't go too far away.
Well, Lund University is certainly one of the oldest and most prestigious universities in Europe, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just Sweden. So it was really an opportunity and a thrill for you to go there.
Yeah.
While you were there, were there any mentors that reinforced your medicine interest?
Well, I was quite convinced at an early stage that I wanted to do surgery. That was after we had surgery in medical school. So my first mentor was Sven-Erik Bergens, and I happened to be the spokesman for our class, so to speak. So I had to take care of some of our foreign guests that came there. So we had a very early and a good relationship.
Yes. Knowing that the European system is different than the American system, you had 6 years. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And at the end of 6 years, what choices did you have at that time?
Well, after it actually was 5.5 years, and after that we had to do a practice for 2 years, which could be served at the university hospital, but it could also be served at other county hospitals. So I went to Halmstad, which was about 150 kilometers north of Malmö, because I was told that if you want to do surgery, you should go to a place like that, because they have good surgery and you will be able to operate much earlier than if you stay at the university.
Right.
So that is what I did, and I was there for those 2 years to complete, to be a licensed doctor, so to speak. And after that, it was another 5 years for general surgery, which I almost completed up there. But after 4.5 years, I then went back to Malmö, because then I knew that I wanted to do vascular surgery. I knew that from the beginning, but I wanted to have as broad of a basis as possible. So that's why I had the opportunity to do bone surgery, trauma surgery, gastric surgery, colonic surgery, and things like that, which was
Please tell us about the relationship between the hospital in Malmö and Lund University.
Well, it was one university with 2 hospitals, so to speak. The Malmö hospital started as a non-university hospital back in the 50s or 60s, and then it got academic status, and the clinical part was told to be better in Malmö than in Lund, and vascular surgery was the most developed one in Malmö, even though it was very good in Lund with Lars Norgren as well. But David Bergqvist and Sven-Erik Bergens really had a good reputation, and I knew that, or I wanted to have some influence on my own career, so to speak, what I was going to do. So then I had the opportunity to come to one of the best places in Sweden, so that's was my choice.
Well, internationally, we certainly have all known Sven-Erik Bergens when he was alive, knew him very well. Would you consider him one of your important mentors?
Yes, he was very, very important for my career. I didn't realize that in the beginning, but now when I look back, I see that it was his ideas, and without his support, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
Right.
I don't think so.
Who else comes to mind as mentors during that period of your life?
And then it is David Bergqvist. David was not there when I went to medical school, but he was there when I got back, and I started to have some research thoughts with him before I got down to Malmö. And everything was, of course, supervised by Sven-Erik Bergens. So those two were the ones that meant a lot to me.
You made an early decision to make vascular surgery your profession.
Yeah.
Despite the fact you had a very broad general surgery background in the old school, where you had orthopedic exposure, trauma exposure,
Yeah.
and so forth.
Yeah.
What in vascular surgery attracted you?
Well, it was the reconstructive part of the surgery. Please understand me right, maybe I'm a little bit mean, but I don't like just to cut anything out and just throw it away or give it to the pathologist. I want to leave the table with a clean impression, and the reconstruction or the reconstructive surgery was very appealing. It was very demanding, and I thought it was, in addition to maybe cardiac surgery, one of the most thrilling parts of surgery that I had met. I also like challenges, so that is why I chose to take vascular surgery.
Other than that 2-month period in your life in France, what international exchanges did you have during your training periods?
Well, it was thanks to Sven-Erik Bergens that I got to Ann Arbor, Michigan, 86 to 87. And it was like this, that we had an international meeting in Sweden, and Bob Rutherford was there, and Jim Stanley was there. And then Sven-Erik came up to me at the dinner and said, "Why, Jan, don't you want to go to the US?" And I said, "Well, yes, of course I would like to, but I don't think that I should go at this stage, because normally you have made your PhD before you get support to go."
Right.
And he said, "Don't bother about that, we'll talk to Jim Stanley." So I talked to Jim, or we talked to Jim Stanley. And I had a project that I had started with prostanoids and their release from the vessel wall. And of course there had been some predecessors from Malmö being in Ann Arbor. So Jim had a good impression of Malmö, so he accepted to take a new fruit.
Well, these are wonderful experiences, as we know, and it's mutually beneficial
Yeah.
to have bright young people come from outside the United States, as you did. Tell us a little bit about your time in Michigan. Did you feel that it augmented and complemented your previous experience, or?
Oh yeah, in many ways. First thing was that I could have a whole year for research without having any clinical parts that I had to take care of, which was very good. So I could focus on the questions that I had. I could focus on the experiments. I got very good support by Jim Stanley. I got the money that I needed. I got lab personnel, and that was very good. And it also taught me to do some vascular surgery, because if you do the experiments that are close to what you're going to do later on, you really can gain also manually.
You had an exposure to American football in the big house, didn't you? Tell us a little bit about that. How did that stack up with what you call football, but we call soccer?
Well, I didn't know anything about American football at all, but I learned to know it, and I must say that I like it a lot. And it's like with everything, the more you know about it,
Right.
the more fun it is. So once you get to know the rules, you know what to look for, and then it's good. So it's just like in surgery, you have to know what you're looking for, and then you will see it. And one of these amazing events for me coming from Sweden, which is a relatively small country with 9 million people, and if it's very crowded, we have 1.5 million in one city, to have 104,000 people sitting outdoors watching football, everybody being sober,
Right.
No screaming, no throwing of anything, and it was amazing. And it was very good, and I liked it a lot. And unfortunately, I cannot see it too much back in Europe. But when I get back to the US, I normally try to see go to a football game.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Back to the more serious side of your research. When you returned after the University of Michigan to Malmö, what did you do over the next few years?
Well, then I finished my thesis, which was on the prostanoid release from the vessel wall, arteries and veins. And my career went on, the clinical part, so to speak. So 1990, I had my PhD, which was about 4 years after leaving Michigan. And then it went on, and I could do a lot of more research and the clinical part.
Yeah.
So then I got the opportunity to go into the staff.
Before we go that far, tell us a little bit about the process in Europe, because it's different in the United States. In getting your thesis, you had an opponent. Tell us a little bit about that process and who your opponent was.
Well, that is a very big event, I tell you.
Yes.
It's like a boxer. You are alone in the ring. There is no help. And you have the opponent, and then you have the audience. And the audience is skilled, and so you have some teachers from the university being there. My opponent was Jesper Swedenborg from Stockholm. And he knew a lot of about prostanoids as well, of course. And you are really nervous when you go up there, because you don't really know what they are going to ask, and you don't know if you are going to be cut into small pieces, and if you are going to leave the room as a good man, or if it's a big disaster. In most of the cases, of course, it's okay, but sometimes they don't like what they hear.
Well, you know, having been an opponent 3 times myself, that's why I ask you this question. And most Americans really miss out on this, because this is a phenomenal academic experience. And as was explained to me, if the opponent doesn't do a good job, you can fail.
Yeah.
You know, which is something, again, quite foreign to our educational system. From all of that, you developed some research interests. Have you continued to pursue those interests, or have you developed other research interests?
Well, as long as I was in Malmö, I could do it. And then when I went to Cologne, it was much harder to do animal research, and I had to do the clinical part much more. So that part was a little bit sleeping.
Yes. I think this is pretty well across the experience of vascular surgeons around the world. These things happen as you develop more administrative responsibilities. Yeah. But were you elevated to professor before you went to Germany?
No, well, I was an associate professor. We don't have assistant professors in Sweden. We have associate professors, and then we have full professors. But there were very few full professors of vascular surgery.
And isn't the reason for that is you really have to be the chief to be a full professor, which is again different than our system.
Now they have changed it, so now you can have 1 or 2 professors in vascular surgery at the big units, but that is, it's very rare to have it, so that is tough.
What attracted you to Cologne, if we may ask?
One day I got a phone call from Cologne, and that was the chief of general surgery who had picked up my name, and he asked if I wanted to come and do the vascular surgery down there. And as I said before, I always like challenges, so I gave it a thought. My wife at that time was from Germany, so I had been to Germany several times, but I hadn't studied in Germany, and I didn't know anything about the German medical system, so to speak. But I thought it was a good challenge to embark the ship, and
Did you feel proficient in the German language at that point of your career?
Well, I had my school German, which was okay, but it's like in the US you have dialects in various parts or accents, so it was very tough, especially in Cologne, to speak to the local people. And my first comment when I got back home from a day in the clinic, one of the first weeks, was that I thought there were so many Dutch people.
Right.
But that is the accent that they have.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So that was tough. But if people spoke normal German, so to speak,
right.
Then it was quite easy to understand. And I guess that they understood me relatively good at that
Did
time.
you find after, let's say, the first year of the exchange, the change in your life to be a positive change?
Yeah, it was quite positive, because it was a challenge that I said, and you get rewarded for what you're doing, which wasn't really the same in Sweden, because it was another healthcare system, just like in the UK and other Scandinavian countries. It's a good system, so I'm not complaining about it, but for me personally, it was good to get a reward when I was doing some more job.
Was there an independent vascular unit when you got there, or did you have to build it?
I had to struggle a lot, unfortunately, and in the beginning it was a quite small unit with, I was told to get 6 people in addition to myself, and when I got down there it turned out to be 4, and then it was very hard to get enough people to my unit, so I had to go to the administration and say that I'm sorry, but it's very hard to work under these circumstances, and you have to do something. I have to get finance, or get control of the finances and get control of the personnel and my staff, and in order to control when I'm going to the OR and I have to have fixed OR rooms. Well, you know, all these struggles that might come up if you have small resources.
Now that you've been there 13 years, are you satisfied with what you have? And tell us a little bit about what you've been able to develop in vascular surgery.
Well, I'm very happy with the position that I have at the moment. I think that we have a good unit. Now we are 15 people, and we have tripled not only the personnel, but the amount of procedures that we are doing, and we are doing a lot of endovascular procedures, of course, and that is something that is quite favorable to practice in Germany, because we are not so restricted like you are in the US. We don't have to wait for the FDA. Right. So that is it's very good, and so I like it a lot. And vascular surgery in Cologne started actually very early with some of my predecessors, Heber, for instance. But then it went down, and when I got there, there wasn't much of vascular surgery. They had some routines, but they were not in an academic fashion, so to speak. So I'm very happy that people now are thinking in an academic way, and they question things, and they attack the problems in a modern fashion. So I think that is very good.
One question for Americans is the relationship in the European common market for your academic activities country to country. And since you've come from Sweden to Germany, is vascular surgery an independent specialty throughout Europe, or Does it vary from country to country? Tell us a little bit about that, please.
It varies from country to country. Most of the European, or many European countries, are now having vascular surgery as a separate specialty. But to exemplify the difficulties, I take my own personal career. And vascular surgery was not a specialty, a separate specialty in Sweden, but it was a separate specialty in Germany since mid-80s. So when I got there, I had a full professorship for vascular surgery, but I wasn't actually licensed to practice vascular surgery. Nobody told me that I had to have a license for that. So then the German system, if you want to educate your colleagues in vascular surgery, you have to go to the chamber, the medical chamber, and ask for permission to educate for now 4 years. And then I did that, and then they said, well, I'm sorry, but you are not registered here. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, and then I had to be tested myself, right, which took 9 months before I had the appointment. So it was difficult, but of course it was a nice talk about vascular surgery, so I wasn't quite nervous for that examination. But still, that is a problem between some countries.
But the European Society for Vascular Surgery does have an examination board with an examination today, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is accepted by several countries, but not by all of them.
It's not mandatory within
It's not mandatory, no.
Well, that's very interesting. Thank you for elucidating that for us. From your own standpoint, tell us a little bit about the vascular fellowship training you have in Cologne today. Do you call it a vascular fellowship?
Well, yes, we do. So we have 2 years of a common trunk, which can be done in general surgery or orthopedic surgery or cardiac surgery and in intensive care. But they can also do it within my unit, so I have that as an educational part as well. But the intensive care is done by the anesthesiologist, so we do that in collaboration. And after that, there is 4 years of vascular surgery training. We don't have it as formalized as you have it in the US, where you can say you're first year, second year, third year, and fourth year, and within that time frame you should have done this and these procedures. But at the end, you should have done about the same. And I tried to apply the American system, which is very good because it deletes many quarrels and argues between the residents. If they just know that I'm a 2-year, it's my turn now to do this and that. Otherwise, it might be a struggle like in the jungle, and that is not good for the education.
Knowing the competition that exists, when your trainee completes the program, do they have an assurance of a position? Or is it becoming more difficult? Do they have to go to other countries in the European common market?
In Germany, the market for vascular surgery is very good. So a lot of hospitals are needing vascular surgeons. They build up even smaller or sometimes even too small units of vascular surgery because it's profitable for the hospital to have vascular surgery. We use the DRG system in our country as well, and it pays off to do that. So the fellows, the good ones, I would like them to stay, of course, but the other ones, they do not have to bother because they will find a position inside of Germany, and they are quite, I would say, 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 quite, I wo competitive even for other positions, even though the Germans do not move outside their country that much.
Right. What is the relationship with interventional cardiology and interventional radiology? Big competitors?
Yes, of course. When you make money on on your work, there will be a competition, of course. But inside the hospital, we don't have that much of competition. The radiologists we work very close, but we do interventions as well as they do. They would like to do more, but as it is a part of vascular training to do endovascular procedures, I let my fellows do that as well. And the interventional cardiologist is not an interventional angiologist, so he's sticking to the heart. Sometimes they denervate the renals, but I don't treat that as a vascular disease, so there's no real competition about that.
Recognizing that cardiothoracic surgery remains very strong throughout Europe and Germany, do they continue to do vascular surgery as trained cardiothoracic surgeons?
Less and less. If you look back 10 years ago, there were more cardiothoracic surgeons doing vascular surgery and even bigger units, but now more and more they split up these units, so they do not do any vascular surgery. So vascular surgery is being done by pure vascular surgeons now.
Can someone train in general surgery and do vascular procedures?
Germany is a relatively free country when it comes to medicine. So as long as you do it well, nobody complains. But if you would do something wrong or something goes wrong, then it might be that the lawyers would approach you and say, well, you are not qualified to do this.
So the individual hospital credentialing committee would be very important in Germany. Yeah, good.
And for AAAs, for instance, in order to get reimbursed, you need to have 2 vascular surgeons in your unit. You have to have kidney replacement therapy. You need to have access to a cardiologist. So they are straightening it up a little bit, which is of course good, because there are, in my opinion, too many hospitals with too small of a volume in order to get really good results.
One of the challenges around the world in vascular surgery, as we know, is having enough open vascular procedures. With more and more endovascular procedures being done, are you finding that a challenge in your own training program?
Yes, I thought in the beginning no, but now when I look back, or when I look at the new generation, I see that they have very little training in open the abdomen. So just opening the abdomen is for many a big challenge.
Right.
And it's got to do with how to treat the tissue. If you've never seen a gut, you are afraid of it. So what we try to do is to keep about maybe 20% of the AAAs an open procedure. There is this gray zone where you can say you can do it open or you can do it with the endovascular. The difference is not that great. So I try to keep about 20% for open procedures, so that the residents get training. Of course, these are the more challenging ones. So they never get to do a very easy tube graft.
Yeah. There is a challenge with humanitarian medicine, but let's focus a little bit on military medicine, because Germany does maintain 2 large military training medical centers, one not far from you in Koblenz. What is your relationship with deployments internationally, that type of thing. What are your thoughts about maintaining military medicine in Germany?
I think it's good. I'm not a military personnel myself, even though I was in Lebanon as a UN soldier back in the early 80s. But the military system has got many advantages in practicing worst case scenario, which is something that we are not dealing with in humanitarian medicine.
Yeah.
So that is good, and but there is not too much of exchange, especially in vascular medicine. We do give some lectures in vascular medicine, but we have more civilian trauma and not so much gunshot wounds like.
I asked in part too because we, the United States and Germany, do share a hospital in Afghanistan today, and the relationship has been very positive from our standpoint. And I just wondered if you had had any feedback from people coming back to Germany about that relationship.
I haven't heard anything yet.
No, thank you very much. Talking about the international activities, let's focus a little bit on why we're doing these interviews. And please tell us a little bit about when you first were made aware of the Society for Vascular Surgery.
I was made aware of the Society for Vascular Surgery back in 1983, 84, I guess.
Even before you went to Michigan, yeah.
Yeah, before I went to Michigan, I had the journal since 1984, something like that.
Right.
So, but I hadn't been to a meeting before I went to Ann Arbor.
Right.
And then the first SVS meeting was in Toronto in 1987, I guess. Yeah. It was in June 1987, where I had the opportunity to present one of my works from Michigan. So, the Society for Vascular Surgery has always been the star in the sky for vascular surgery, and of course together with the European, which came a little bit later, but these are the two major vascular societies in the world, I think.
We're here at the VEITH Symposium in New York City today, but Roger Greenhalgh has also held a similar meeting each year, and I remember being at his meeting when they had the first meeting of the European Vascular Surgery Society, so it's grown very rapidly since then, and there's been a good relationship between the two societies.
Yeah.
What is your thought about the old International Cardiovascular Society with the various European and North American chapters and so forth? It's still very strong in Europe, isn't it, through the cardiothoracic surgeons?
It's relatively strong, but not as strong as the European Society for Vascular Surgery. So the cardiovascular surgeons are struggling with their meeting. Now it's been growing, so I think that they are back on track again. But they were, in my opinion, a little bit too much focused on open surgery for too long of a period of time, so that the endovascular train was gone, and that held them up for a while. And
do you think we have too many societies, even in vascular surgery?
At least we do not have too few. I think we have many, yes.
Because Ted Dietrich has the International Society for Endovascular Surgery, and through this group, at the VEITH meeting, there's now the International Vascular Surgery Society, and the list goes on. The Society for Vascular Surgery also has an international component to it. Do you encourage your young trainees to come to the Society for Vascular Surgery?
Yes, I have on my list for research purposes, so to speak, three meetings that they should go. That's the German one, of course, and then it's the European Society for Vascular Surgery, and then it's SVS. And then for other educational purposes, you can choose other meetings, like the meeting here in New York, the VEITH meeting, or the Charing Cross. Now there are some younger meetings coming up with more interventional issues, like the LINK meeting, for instance, which is growing and growing. So you have to be aware of the fact that you have to live with that what is evolution, or you have to live with the evolution.
Yeah, sure.
And you cannot say that it will always be this society or it will always be this kind of meeting, because the meeting has to change as well.
The Society for Vascular Surgery sponsors the international fellowships for trainees. Do you think that's been a good positive move for international?
I think it is, and I think that there could be even more, not only from the Society for Vascular Surgery, but also from the European Society for Vascular Surgery, because the more you see, the better you will get, and the more broad-minded you are, the better you will take care of your patients. And you will see that it's not only your own mentor. If you only had one, it's a big mistake. Sure. So you have to have at least 3-4 mentors, and if you have the opportunity to stay a longer period of time at another institution, you can pick up so much. You can also leave something there when you're there.
The Society for Vascular Surgery owns the Journal of Vascular Surgery, which was essentially started in 1982. Your career has been involved with this period of time. If you had a preferred article, would you think about submitting it to the Society for Vascular Surgery's journal?
Yeah, and I'm doing so.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that. What other journals do you think would compete with the Journal of Vascular Surgery on the international scene?
It's the European Journal for Vascular and Endovascular Surgery, of course. These are the two major ones. Then you have Annals of Vascular Surgery. And you can have add some more to them, but I think that the first two ones are the ones that are combining clinical work with research, and if you read them, you are very well equipped. If you focus more on endovascular techniques, of course, you have the ISIS and Journal of Endovascular Therapy, which does not cover the whole field of vascular surgery, though.
In the United States, as you know, we have the American Surgical Association, we have the Society of University Surgeons, and the list goes on with regional societies that aren't particularly devoted to vascular surgery, but as academicians, we must participate in those meetings too. Do you have that type of additional competition? What about the European Society for Surgery?
The European Society for Surgery is a very quiet society, at least for vascular.
Right.
I don't think that they have any vascular papers at all.
So there isn't a competition then?
No, there is not really a competition. If you go into other countries like Italy, maybe France and Germany, you will have a lot of local or regional meetings, which of course are competing with the big meetings because they will drain the sponsors. We have to face the fact there is not tons of money everywhere, which might be a problem. And if you talk to the industry, they admit it themselves. But I don't think that we have larger meetings in Europe competing with the vascular meetings.
The relationship between angiology and vascular surgery in Europe, this is something that's a little bit confusing to Americans because angiology never really caught on in the United States. Could you tell us a little bit about that relationship in Europe?
Well, I think that the angiologists are still struggling a little bit, also in Europe. There are some institutions and some big names that are doing a very good job, but there are many hospitals without any angiologists because they haven't really defined what is their area. Some think that they should do some interventional procedures, and others stick to conservative medicine, so to speak. So there is, even though in Germany there is education
Right.
for that, there aren't many, and we do not have any angiologists in my hospital, which is of course a drawback. But the German Society for Vascular Surgery encourages also the presence of angiologists, because there is a kind of a certification which is called for a Center for Medicine or Vascular Medicine. And in order to have such, you have to have an interventional radiologist, you have to have an angiologist, and you have to have vascular surgeons, of course. So it is something good, and I think that this is something that should evolve more. But if everybody is competing to do the same things,
Right.
endovascular, just from another standpoint, then I think it's more troublesome.
The other area of the vascular system that always had more interest in Europe is related to the venous side. Phlebology, we know there's a European Venous Forum. In recent years, we've created American Venous Forum. What is your impression about the arterial side versus the venous side of the vascular system?
Well, I think that the venous side is very important, but in many countries there are too many actors on the field. So for academic vascular surgery, there are very few patients with a venous disease coming there. So the bulk of venous diseases are being treated by somebody else, mostly phlebologists, but it could be somebody else without even a proper education for that. So the relationship venous diseases, arterial diseases is in most centers, I would say, 10 to 90.
You've had such a broad exposure to medicine and to vascular surgery in numerous parts of the world. How do you think the United States stacks up today with Europe, let's say, or even other parts of the world in vascular surgery?
Oh, U.S. is doing very fine. I think that maybe it would be even better if the regulations were a little bit looser and not that tight. I understand that it's important to have institutions like the FDA, but from what I see, we normally get to do the interventions or try new instruments or new devices or new stent grafts way ahead of you, because you have to wait for the FDA, and the FDA will look at Europe before they make any decision. And if it looks good in Europe, they will take it to the US. So, I mean, there are two sides to the coins, and one is that you have some centers that are very, very well known and have a very high level of what they're doing, but I guess that on the broad basis there is a time lag, maybe due to regulations.
You were encouraged to go with Jim Stanley. Bob Rutherford encouraged you to do that. If you had a young person today that you would like to have some international experience, do you have any favorite countries or locations where you might send that individual?
I would send them, kind of depends on what they would like to train. for research purposes, they should go to the US. There is no other country where it's so, let's say, easy to do research. If you have a good project, you get the money. You have to have a mentor, of course, and a sponsor. But it seems to be easier in the US than in many other countries because if you believe in something, you get the money, and then you will derive or direct the money to that person. For the clinical part, there are endovascular institutions in the US that are extremely well known with a high volume that we are very jealous that we do not get in Europe. And that also goes for some of the open procedures. And if I would like to train somebody in open thoracoabdominal, of course I would send them to Houston or Boston or some other of these well-known places. So I think that the US is a very good country, but if somebody would not go that far, there are other countries in Europe as well where you can send somebody where it's also good or possible to get a good education. I think it's important to know that the primary thing is to see something else, and of course it's very good if you can see the best, and there the US is very highly ranked.
If I were a young person and I came to you and I said I'm a little bit confused, but I think I might like vascular surgery, would you encourage me? Do you think there's a bright future ahead? Would you be willing to be a mentor?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think vascular disease will be more and more, or we will have more and more patients. The community is growing older, and the vascular system is also growing, and we know that we are dealing with old vascular diseases. So even though smoking is going down, people live longer. So I do not think that vascular diseases will cease, and it's beautiful surgery, and it's great to be able to do it, and patients are thankful. If you think about critical limb ischemia, and there are so many parts of the body where you can practice your surgical skills. So I think that vascular is...
If I said to you, not only am I a little bit confused, but I'm married and I have 2 young children, do you think there can be a life for me as a vascular surgeon? How do you achieve balance?
Well, we were talking about regulations in FDA that was for medical tools, but for medical personnel we have stricter regulations in Europe. So we are not allowed to work more than 42 hours a week, and you can extend it to 54, and that includes being on call. So this means that there will be time for the family as well. And especially in Germany, we now have 75% of medical students are females. And before we men can bear children, I think that there will be family life. And I think it's important that we accommodate to the new system that will evolve. If that would come in the US as well, I'm not quite sure.
Up to 75% women?
Up to 75% are women.
So we're certainly above 50%, but we're not approaching that yet at all. No.
So this means, of course, that they often have other interests.
Right.
A couple of years ago, it was a little bit tough to find medical students that would like to do surgery, and even vascular surgery. But now in my institution, about 50% of the residents are females. And nothing bad about it.
That's a dramatic change, isn't it?
It's a dramatic change.
Looking back and thinking about everything we've discussed in the last hour, can you think of anything that just comes to mind that we should do better or could do better in vascular surgery?
I have a belief that volume matters. I don't think that in the US you have this big of a problem that we have in Europe. I think that the caseload is a little bit too small, and the more you see, the more you will learn, and it's so rewarding having seen much. In order to localize even the things that you see maybe once or twice in your lifetime.
Right.
And so I think that we should try to focus on the specialty. I do not think that vascular surgery should be combined with general surgery. I think that you should have relatively big units. We discuss about how large they should be, but I think that you should be able to have an on-call. So you have to have at least 3 consultants, 4 or 5, maybe 8 is even better. And you have larger volumes for AAAs and for carotids and for the legs. So I think that is what we have to focus on, try to centralize or regionalize vascular surgery a little bit more, at least in Europe.
Do you think we're going to be able as societies to afford all of the new devices and the aging population that you've emphasized?
I'm not quite sure. I think that the new devices are relatively expensive. And we're not talking about production cost always. So I do not think that this can go on forever. If we have reached the limit now, or if the politicians are allowing us to spend more money on healthcare, I'm not quite sure, but it kind of depends on what system you have. As long as you have payers, you will have sellers.
We've covered a great deal in this relatively short hour, Dr. Brunkwall, and we appreciate all your personal visions on what's happening in Europe. Are there any things that we've left out? Do you think there's anything that you can think of that we should add to this in relationship to the Society for Vascular Surgery, vascular surgery in general, whatever? Please.
I think that at least for Europe, the information about vascular disease is way behind. So people are not aware of how dangerous it is to have a vascular disease. Most of them, they just think about varicose veins or maybe coronary bypass. But when we talk about critical limb ischemia, then it's as dangerous or maybe even more dangerous than having cancer. They look very astonished. So I think this is something that we have to educate.
What about the internet? Do you think that is helpful to the general population to Google and try to get their answer? And where do we as professionals enter into this with the educational requirements?
Well, the internet is very important, and I get a lot of patients who had Googled, but still you have to have knowledge, you have to have basic knowledge, you have to put everything into context, and that you cannot do on the internet. Then you have to have some professional where you can go and ask. But most of the, or many of the patients now are very well educated about terms, what are we talking about, and what could the options be, but to judge the two therapeutic options, or to have the right balance, that's where you have to have a vascular surgeon, and the vascular surgeon is, in my opinion, the best person to educate on vascular diseases.
You've been so busy with so many things. Do you have any outside activities? Skiing, is that?
Yes, I love skiing. If I have the chance, I try to go twice a year, 2 weeks. I do some sailing in the summer. I used to play tennis, but I don't have the time. I would like to play some golf, but I don't have the time. So I normally exercise at work. We have 4 stores in the building, and I never use the elevator. I always use the stairs.
Okay.
And then I do some walking and some biking.
Well, this has been a delightful interview, and on behalf of the Society for Vascular Surgery, Dr. Brunkwall, we would certainly like to thank you for this interview today.
Well, thank you. Please.